Good morning and welcome to the sermon for St. Mark's and All Saints for August 9th, 2020. Starting on July 16th, 2020, and running through December, the Diocese of Northwestern Pennsylvania and Western New York are engaging in a denominational-wide program called Sacred Ground. In this program, we are examining the history, interrelationships, and impacts of classism, racism, and white supremacy in the United States as a first step toward healing, reconciliation, and justice. Now, I know for some of you, maybe even most of you, this sounds like an exercise in liberal self flagellation and anti Americanism. That it is a way to blame the failures of people who will just not pull themselves up by their own bootstraps on good, hardworking taxpayers. And that it has nothing to do with today's or any day's gospel. But what I am finding is that this program is not about blame, but rather truth. Throughout American history, we have lied to our own children regarding the history of this nation. Our schools have taught a whitewashed narrative of history, and we as students in those schools have absorbed this falsehood. It has become part of our own identity and has created a lens through which we see the world. We see our country as one in which progress has always marched forward, and in which anyone can succeed if they just try hard enough. But it is a lie. From before its founding, our nation has been built upon a racialized caste system, one in which most white people are able to get by, though not necessarily get ahead, but those with darker hues are held back. Throughout our history, white people have been invited by politicians, the wealthy, and institutions to look down upon those of other races and to enforce racialized barriers and laws. Before the Civil War in the South, poor whites were legally bound to join slave patrols, the first police forces in the United States, to control the enslaved black populace. After the Civil War, in both the North and the South, police departments were founded primarily to protect the property of the wealthy and to enforce a racialized hierarchy. In the North, this meant not just keeping blacks out of well-paying jobs, but also maintaining the separation between new immigrants from Eastern Europe and Italy from the English, German, and increasingly Irish white populace. In the South, the police departments and the lynch mobs were often interchangeable, or at least in open cooperation with one another. By the turn of the 20th century, plantation owners in the South and factory owners in the North had consolidated much of the wealth in this nation. And while a few at the top had built up vast fortunes, most people in this country struggled to get by. When the Great Depression hit, much of the country did not have any nest eggs or safety nets to rely upon. So for many white people, which now included those of Eastern European and white and Italian ancestry, the New Deal was a godsend that saved us and our ancestors from starvation. But Black people and other people of color, including the large Asian American population that lived in California, were cut out of the New Deal. The very programs that saved our families from destitution were not available to those who were already at the bottom of the economic ladder due to pre-existing racist laws and policies. Further, after World War II, the GI Bill elevated many white families into a new middle class through job training, low-interest mortgages, college education, and other programs. But Black soldiers and other peoples of color, including the Navajo code talkers who had played such a pivotal role in winning the war, were again left out of these systems. Into the 1980s and even today, though what was once government policy is now technically illegal, people of color were prevented from purchasing homes in newer, more prosperous neighborhoods. Instead, many have been forced into older, more decrepit housing stock with higher interest mortgages in inner city neighborhoods, where the interrelated issues of drug abuse, developmental delays, and mental health issues are policed and punished rather than treated. The system has been rigged again and again, and yet we are told that all people have an equal chance to succeed. This is not about feeling guilty for being white, but about recognizing that being white means that there are not barriers to your success imposed on the basis of the color of your skin. And in understanding the depth, history, and ongoing implications of this recognition means that we have the ability to create a more equal nation, one that lives up to the ideals that it espouses. It means that we can learn to see the world through the eyes of those who look different from ourselves and to truly love one another as ourselves. But what does any of this have to do with our gospel today? What does it have to do with Jesus walking on water in the midst of the storm on the Sea of Galilee? Or with Peter hopping out of a perfectly good boat to go for a walk on the water towards Jesus and nearly drowning in the attempt? Or with Jesus saving Peter and remarking on his little faith? Well, here's the thing. Whenever I've heard this gospel story, I've always heard it as a rebuke of Peter for only having a little faith, for having too little faith. But in the midst of a violent thunderstorm, Peter got out of the boat, and Peter walked on water. Peter may not have had the faith of Jesus to walk out into the middle of the Sea of Galilee, but Peter had a little faith, and that little faith allowed him to walk on water. And that is powerful. I know that the Sacred Ground program, the broader awakening to racial injustice and protests throughout this country can seem like an effort to tear down a country that we and our ancestors have so carefully built up. But for me, they are about having faith, about the faith to get out of the boat in which we have all been comfortable and complacent as white people, about walking across the troubled waters of racial injustice together, and about the faith to lift one another up when we start to fall into the depths of anger, injustice, and despair. It is about a faith in a nation that is human and always falls short of its potential, but that has the ability to do better. It's about a faith in one another, that we are in our very essence good, because that is the way God created us to be. It is about a faith in the liberation that truth can bring. And it is about a faith in God, that we are not alone in our struggles, and that when we fall short, God will catch us and lead us back. So over the next several months, I'm going to ask you to come with me and to walk across these choppy waters together. It won't be easy, and some of us may slip beneath the waves at times, but with a little faith, we will get through. Amen.